In this video, we're going to talk about the term model and what it really means. So I'm Daniel Norton, photographer here in New York. I make videos like this. This one's going to be, I guess, a bit philosophical, maybe a little business. And I make them about business, I make them about gear, technique, all different kinds of stuff. So if that interests you, go ahead and subscribe. So, let's see. This has been kind of brewing a little bit. I've just been in my notes for a while because I consistently get comments or messages or various things where people talk about not a model or is a model or this and that, and you know, it's funny. It's one of those terms that gets tossed around a lot, and I think that we have to, like all things, you know, we need to look at it with perspective. So if somebody says, well, you know, you're photographing this person and they'll never be a model, or they're not a model and you're photographing them, or you should shoot people that aren't models because that's what a real photographer does. You know, what their definition of model is the curious part in that, right? So if you look at, like when I was a kid, you know, when that first came up, right, usually people threw the word model out there. It meant something much more specific, I think, than what people necessarily mean or understand as a model these days. It wasn't super accurate, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but basically the idea was, if, you know, when I was 20 years old and I said, well, you know, I need to get some models to shoot, basically what I meant was the type of person, mostly women. I mean, I think there's still more female models than there are male, but, you know, mostly, there's definitely a lot more male models than there used to be, but mostly female models. They would be, you know, generally with an agency. They would be of a certain height and a certain, you know, size, as far as dress size or whatever. They had a certain look to them, and they were essentially the people that were hoping to, or were doing things like magazine covers, fashion editorials inside, catalogs, fashion catalogs, that is. These were models. Things that I didn't really think about but still existed back then were still exist, were what we called commercial models. So let's say somebody in their, you know, mid-40s that's you know, a mom or dad, you know, or with a kid in a park, you know, and they're in these catalogs as well, you know, for maybe the catalogs that are more kind of like a Sears catalog or a more middle America kind of, you know, not the fashion catalogs like the, you know, these models were still models. They're commercial print models, as I say. They often were used in things that were more advertising based and less fashion. And I think that while we in the industry have always called them models or talent, I think that most people, when they see a mid-40s guy, you know, walking a dog in the park, you know, for an ad for, you know, aspirin, they don't think of that person as a model, right? They don't think, oh, model. Like, that's not what they're thinking when they see that, right? So, you know, that was kind of what we thought of as models. And I think that thinking still moves forward today, even though the industry as a whole has really changed. And there's a lot more people of all different shapes, sizes, backgrounds, you know, how they look, that are able to model. And we're talking commercially. I mean, essentially, if somebody gets in front of your camera, so all right, so I'm going to rewind back. We're going to talk about the definition in a second, but the scope has opened. There's a lot, just like there's a lot more photography opportunity, even though people might sit around and go, it's not like the good old days. There's way more photography being produced now than there ever was. Same thing with models. There's way more need for models than there used to be. And the scope of who is a model has changed a lot. You know, when, if you think about it, if you have a magazine, let's just go back to magazines, even though print is dead. But, you know, I think people still keep that as their baseline, right? I probably shouldn't do these videos during rush hour because we get a lot of cars, people coming home from work. Anyways, I couldn't do that. It was such a nice day on Sunday that I couldn't do it. So this is actually, I mean, I'm going to literally record this and put it right up. Anyways, I usually shoot the Monday one on Sunday, if that's not obvious, because it's quieter, generally. Anyways, so, I forgot where I was at. Oh, there's a lot more need, right? So you are looking at more people, okay, magazines, cut that whole part, right? So, let's say you're thinking about a magazine. Actually, the change started. I'm not actually sure because I was too young to really remember who used to be on magazine covers. But in the 80s, when I was a child, they became this phenomenon that became what people began to call the supermodel. Maybe it was called that before, and I just didn't know about it because I was too young. But the idea was that these individual models, mostly, especially in the 80s, I think they were all female, mostly female, were became celebrities in a sense from modeling. So basically, they became famous for being models. You know, you would see a magazine cover and be like, "Oh, that's Cindy Crawford. I want to pick up that magazine because I like Cindy Crawford." You know, the same way you might like, you know, any other celebrity, Audrey Hepburn or whatever. So it rose these certain models to a level where people started buying the magazines because they were on the cover because of the celebrity status of the model. And then somewhere, I'm gonna say in the 90s, it felt like there became this trend of putting. Actually, it might have been the late 80s because I think Herb Ritts was really a big part of this. You photography history buffs can probably correct me on this, but I think Herb Ritts was definitely a big part of this, where they started photographing more celebrity type people for the covers of fashion magazines. Now, yes, of course, People magazine or whatever always had a celebrity on the cover. They didn't put a model. I'm talking about magazines that usually had, quote, models on the cover. Started having Madonna or, other, or actresses and stuff like that on the cover. And if you look now on the cover of many, many magazines, you see that actors and actresses are often on the covers. And magazines like Maxim magazine, which wasn't really a fashion magazine, of course, I don't think they're around now, but they were huge in the 90s, and they were doing this kind of glamour thing where, and it was mostly celebrities. So you would have a celebrity, that was in a movie, and they would pose in a very sexy way, kind of basically in Maxim magazine, and it wouldn't be a model or it wouldn't be like a pinup model, like a Playboy model, whatever you want to call it. It would be like, Scarlett Johansson. Probably wasn't Scarlett Johansson because she was probably just a kid in the 90s, but you know what I'm saying. Like somebody like that, right? Like a beautiful actress, but done up like a model in that sense. And I feel like around there is when, at least to me, and I started noticing it more, lines really started to blur. You started seeing ads that traditionally had models in them instead have, models, meaning that's all they do is they model, they don't talk, whatever, starting to have actors in them more, like in celebrity type actors. And then you also noticed more commercial print type modeling people starting to do little bits of commercial stuff where they'd be like background people or walking in the background or maybe a line here and a line there. They weren't really actors, at least to begin with. In fact, I remember photographing for some commercial print agencies here in New York City when I first came up, and one of the big things was every one of these models, even though they had really they weren't trying to be actors per se, we would do their shots and then we would do short video clips. Back when cameras just didn't have video built in like they do now, man, it was a pain in the butt, right? And you would shoot these like little clips. Sometimes they weren't even talking. Sometimes they would just be like walking or doing whatever, because the agencies wanted to get them in these commercials because of residuals. So everything's money, right? It all comes down to money. Shoot forward to whenever I'm going to say Instagram, but I mean none of those stuff before that. There was probably MySpace models or celebrities at that point too, but where all of a sudden you can have these people that are basically, they're just images of them. And now I think there's actually, I mean, again, there's probably still more females, but there's a lot more men. I mean, I see them a couple of times, who have these like awesome Instagram profiles of them modeling. And when we look at these people, and I know some people like to berate and be like, Instagram models. Whatever, we're not being negative people here. What's interesting to me is a lot of these people would not have been able to make it, and not because they're not attractive or talented or whatever, but literally just because of how tall they are and whatever size, the exact fitting, they wouldn't have been able to be models, whether they be commercial print models or, I got mail. Oh, it doesn't look like anything big. No, just a little thing. I'll get it later. Usually he honks the horn if it's something big. So, they wouldn't be able to do this. So you've got these like, people who are doing, either companies are directly sending them product and maybe a little bit of money or whatever to do little poses with their stuff, or they're just making these really beautiful portfolios shot by photographers who aren't necessarily ever looking to be big big. The commercial photographers, they just love doing it, and they're able to create these beautiful images that are like the images we see in magazines or whatever you want to say. They're like the images that the fashion and commercial photographers are producing, internationally for advertising. But they're not for that, right? They're for the photographer to enjoy creating that process, and for this person who isn't really ever going to move to a big city and maybe do a full-time model to do images like they see in the magazines. It's creating just to create. And it's super interesting. And I think that when you look at this situation, this is where maybe like different terms need to be used, but they won't be. I mean, I'm not going to change the world with terms, and I don't really care. I think that it's super interesting. Like whenever I photograph somebody, I use the term model. It might be, a 75-year-old man that came by for a portrait. It might be, 17-year-old, 6 foot tall, female that's going to try to, actually work in the fashion industry. When somebody is in front of my camera, they are the model. They are the talent. I treat them as such. I treat every shoot like that is the thing. And when you try to put people down, as some people do, by saying they're not a model or whatever, like, what does that even mean? Like, are you getting in front of the camera and being photographed for this beautiful photo or hoping to make a beautiful photo? Then you're a model. It's that simple. I've said this before about being a photographer. You're a photographer when you say you're a photographer and you make photos. You might not be a great photographer. We're all trying to be there eventually. But you are that, right? You're that when you're doing the thing. You don't necessarily have to make a living doing it. And for somebody to say this person's on model, I'm not. I mean, and you wouldn't. I won't tell you, but you wouldn't believe the number of people that I photographed that most people would look at them and be like, that person's a model, and they will say, I'm not a model. And they mean it. They don't mean it in a way like I'm not a model. Ooh, like they mean it like, no, I'm not a model. Like I'm just a person. Because they don't do it full time, right? Everybody looks at these things different. That term is so wide open. So I just find it fascinating because, it's like, okay, so, and what does that even mean, right? It's like, and just specifically, I got a comment the other day where on one of the videos where it was something like, if you were a good photographer, you would photograph real people and still get shots or something like that. And I just thought to myself, like, I'm looking at this video with this person I photographed, and I'm like, are they not real? Like, huh? Like you're not a good photographer if the person that you photograph is considered conventionally beautiful. I mean, everybody has beauty in their own way. It's like, what does that even mean? What are we saying to people, that like you're not good because you photograph attractive people, or that you are good because you don't photograph them, or vice versa? I mean, yes, there is this case where you can take somebody who is very attractive and make a terrible picture of them, and you will get likes. It's the truth. I mean, I hate to say it. Same thing with babies and puppies and sunsets. People photograph those things for a reason, right? It's like if you're an average person and you're flipping through your Instagram feed and you see that your next door neighbor who takes pictures sometimes photographed this really beautiful person. They got this guy and he's like all muscly and all. And even if the picture's not that good, if the person's attractive, you'll probably like it because that's just the way it is. People like to look at attractive people. And so yes, I'm not saying that photographing attractive people makes you a good photographer, because it absolutely doesn't. But it's also the opposite is also not true. Just because you're photographing attractive people doesn't mean it's easy. And I know I get comments. I would 100 comments a day about how you can't take a bad picture of this person. Yes, you can. Either you don't understand what a bad picture is, or you just aren't looking hard enough. Because there's lots of bad pictures of people that line's made about all the time. Because I think ultimately that's the thing, right? I've said this before. You really want your photo itself, now we're going off the topic of model, but you really want the photo itself to stand on its own, right? If I make a photo that's interesting, it shouldn't matter if the person is a model or not a model, or if they're conventionally attractive or if they're conventionally not attractive, What makes somebody look good in photos is lighting, composition, attitude that they have. I mean, you definitely can make somebody look bad or look good, but ultimately people need to feel comfortable with themselves. And if you can make them feel comfortable with themselves so that they are natural in the photo and it comes through in the photo and they feel confident, that's a good photo. That's the beauty. No matter what they look like. You don't want the person who is, considered conventionally beautiful to be awkward, because that's not a good photo to me. It's just an awkward picture of somebody that's beautiful. It's like, yeah. And you don't want, the conventionally unattractive person, or whatever that even means, certainly as well. But if that person has a lot of energy and they look excited in the picture and they're smiling, or even with, or not, I mean, if you're doing a serious picture, or there's lots of mood, that can create something beautiful. So who is a model? Every single person, or for you, Patty, dogs, or whatever. Yeah, I mean, mostly dogs for you. I don't think, if you decide to do a cat someday, we'll add that to your list. Every single person or animal or whatever that you put in front of your camera is a model. Treat them like a model. Treat them with respect. Treat everybody the same. Try to make everybody as comfortable as possible, and pull out an image that everybody that is there is proud of. You're not just like shooting fish in a barrel because they're attractive and whatever, it's a good picture because they're good looking. No, it's not. And it's not any more difficult, really, to make a photo of somebody who's not conventionally good looking, because really what's important is that connection. If you can make that connection, you'll get the shot. So that's my take. In short, I could have made this video very short, I guess. Everybody's a model in my book. You get in front of the camera, you take that step to do it, you can call yourself a model anytime you want. Don't look down on people who are trying to do it. Don't feel like you're less than them because and you're not a model because they have more followers or whatever. You are a model if you want to be one. At the very least, you're a model in that moment. And that's what matters, right? You might not always be a model, but for that day, you went and stood in front of the camera and you were the model. So good for you. It's always fun. So I can say I've been a model sometimes. And I'm an excellent model. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. If you have not already, go ahead and subscribe. Let me know what you think about this. What's your take on this? Am I nuts? I mean, is that a word just shouldn't be used? Should we call them subjects or talent? Or what would you prefer to call them if not model? And let me know below. And also ring the bell and subscribe, like I said. And I will see you next time.